All right, welcome sixth graders. So this is the last podcast of chapter two, and we'll be talking about how communities are starting to become built and formed. All right, so the first thing is we have these early towns that are developing. Before we've talked about how we had hunter-gatherer societies, they start settling down into these small little groups, and these groups start forming into towns, and they settled in these different places that met a certain criteria. They had to have plentiful water, and they had to have great soil for their crops. They'd figured this out when they started settling down earlier and knew of these areas. Um, so some of the crops that they first raised and domesticated were wheat and barley because it provided a lot of nutrition. It was easy to grow. Um, and then they also were able to domesticate sheep and goats. Um, so they get all of these crops, start getting this surplus. We know that population starts to grow. And because of this surplus, they're able to then start trading with other nearby towns. And towns at this time, it's only a few thousand people, like 1,000 to 2,000. They're not very large yet, but they will be getting there because, again, as they have more food, as they have a larger surplus, it's going to start growing and getting bigger and bigger. Um, and then also, too, as trade increases, you start to have people exchanging goods, and really importantly, the exchange of ideas. Right? And these ideas are what are going to help shape and change people's lives. So if we look at this map here of Mesopotamia, you can see here what it's doing is, notice they have the two rivers. You have the Tigris River and the Euphrates River, and this is an area, it's called the Fertile Crescent. So these little villages are kind of popped up in places that are more suitable for the development of these early towns and some of our first civilizations. All right, so this all kind of leads to a new way of life for these people. We have something that, because these advances in technologies, you can have less people doing more work, so other people need to do things, right? We've kind of already talked about this. But the biggest thing is that we have this division of labor. And what that is that a division of labor is that people start having different jobs, a division of the labor. So you've got farmers, you've got potters, you've got people who become merchants who are selling goods, all sorts of different people kind of pop up in this new way of life, this new style. Um, so and because of that, there's different responsibilities. So depending upon your job, you're going to have different responsibilities, and then society starts to be formed into what we call social classes, or this social hierarchy that you'll see throughout all life. They still exist today. Um, and at this time, the people who are at the top were your rulers and your priests. They were the ones that would be at like the top of a triangle. So if you could imagine it looking like a triangle, they'd be the ones at the very top. And then those who'd be like your merchants, they'd be kind of in the middle. And at the very bottom, you would have your farmers and slaves and things of that nature. Okay. Um, so these towns, the leaders of the towns have to have unwritten laws, because there's no writing at the time, so they have these unwritten laws that help govern them. All right, and this is where our first early set of government comes from, in that um, because of these unwritten laws, this is government. They have to have these rules to make sure that everything is that society fashions, that society works in an organized way. All right, so here's kind of an image of the early towns that you would see. And kind of people are a little bit more spaced out. They're not living right on top of each other, right? They live close to the fields and farms that they work in. You just go down the road here. We can see another civilization being developed over here. It's like a pyramid type form, so that we know that this is probably more like a larger city, because it's going to have more things. But there's trade going on. People are going through the towns. There's irrigation here, which is important. You've got your pastures for your farming, or for your animals, I'm sorry. And then you've got your farmers over here in the fields. You get the sky going up into the palm trees. to get the palms that they would put on top of the houses and stuff. And so you can see there's lots of different things happening in this town on a daily basis. You got fishing going on here in the background. You got people making adobe. So all sorts of fun and good things going on here. All right. So again, these small towns then develop into cities. And when we talk about cities, we're talking about populations of larger than 5,000 people. Okay, so to us, not very large, but if you were to put it in like modern day terms, these would be like the New York cities, the Chicagos, the Parises, the Mexico cities, which is, by the way, the largest city in the world. Um, all of these large, huge metropolitan areas. That's what these cities developed into at these times. All right, so they need to be much more highly organized than the towns. A lot more people, a lot more things can happen, so you need better government systems. So the government, the city leaders and the government had to build the defenses, they had to maintain the water supplies, that included the irrigation systems, the construction of temples, palaces, and other different buildings that would happen in there. Um, all of this building and things leads to taxation or collection, and at this time this is collection of crops or working on projects as a form of payment. Okay, so to pay off your taxes you had to either be a farmer or you had to build something for the city. That's how they didn't have money at this time. You could trade goods, that might work, but otherwise you had to pretty much grow crops or um, be a part of a building crew. So this is kind of where Mesopotamia develops. Again, that's that area known as the Fertile Crescent, okay, that we saw earlier in that slide. Okay? So again, this is Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent. And large areas, so these cities covered large areas, civilizations, and cities. And the economies were better run, and they constructed larger buildings and temples. So again, have to serve a larger population, so they're going to need bigger things. They also had central government for controlling the civilization. So within the early towns, where it was more kind of like family run, the families are the ones that really ran it. Here at this time, you're going to see more elected officials or appointed officials kind of be the ones who rule it. It's not just going to be like a family. There are going to be multiple families that run it. But the important thing is, because of the largeness and because you have people in this division of labor in society, we're able to start seeing advances in science, math, transportation, writing, record keeping, trade, and tax. All these sort of things, all these important things that you need to form a complex society are starting to happen because we're having larger people live in areas. More people are able to spread their ideas to one another, and it really starts to skyrocket. I remember we talked about collective learning, and collective learning is really being built upon here at this time. And another thing that's important as well is that religion starts to become more important. Right. So here is kind of an image of a larger city. So you notice high walls, big buildings, people living very cramped, small areas with lots of houses. Again, that's an urban area. Okay, and so kind of to summarize all of this, what makes a civilization? What are the important things we need to understand about civilization? Is that it's an organized society. It's got an economy, strong economy, and it's got religion in it. Okay, there's a central government, somebody that runs the civilization as well, and then you also see advances in writing and technology. All right. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll catch you on the flip side.